The envelope arrived on a Tuesday, carried by Gary, our mailman, who held it with the tips of his fingers like it was a live grenade or a dirty diaper. Gary is a good man. He's seen things in this neighborhood. He's seen grown men cry over citation notices for leaving a garden hose uncoiled. He's seen marriages disintegrate over disputes regarding the placement of decorative gnomes. When he handed me the envelope, he didn't make eye contact. He just mumbled, "Certified mail, Jack. Sorry," and retreated to the safety of his truck, revving the engine a little too hard as he sped away toward the freedom of the main road. I stood on my porch, the morning sun hitting the terrifyingly green grass of Oak Haven Estates, and looked at the letter. It was heavy. Heavier than paper had any right to be. It felt like it was printed on sheets of lead. The return address was stamped in a gold foil that probably cost more than my monthly water bill, the Oak Haven Estates Homeowners Association Executive Board. You know that specific genre of rage that starts in the pit of your stomach, somewhere behind your navel, and radiates outward until your fingertips feel like they're vibrating? That was me. It was 10 a.m. I hadn't even had my second cup of coffee. I walked back inside, the door latching with a soft click behind me. My house was my sanctuary. I had bought it 3 years ago, a foreclosure that smelled of cat urine and despair, and I had gutted it. I stripped it down to the studs, rewired it, replumbed it, and turned it into a modern fortress of solitude. I worked in cybersecurity, specifically in penetration testing and network defense. My entire professional life revolved around the concept of boundaries. I built firewalls. I hunted vulnerabilities. I kept unauthorized entities out of places they didn't belong. And the Oak Haven HOA was, by definition, an unauthorized entity. I sat at my kitchen island, grabbed a letter opener, and sliced the envelope. Inside was a single sheet of thick, cream-colored linen paper. The text was justified. The font was Times New Roman, size 12, and the tone was pure, distilled condescension. "Dear homeowner," it began. Not Jack, not Mr. Thompson, just homeowner. Like I was a temporary biological placeholder for the real estate, a flesh bag merely tasked with paying the property taxes until the house decided to sell itself. Effective immediately, pursuant to the newly ratified Community Safety and Emergency Preparedness Initiative, Bylaw 14. B. All residents are required to provide a duplicate copy of their primary entry key to the HOA Board Executive Committee. This measure is to ensure rapid access in the event of catastrophic infrastructure failure, gas leaks, water main bursts, or welfare checks when the resident is unreachable. I stopped reading. My brain tried to process the sentence, but it kept snagging on the phrase duplicate copy of their primary entry key. I forced myself to read on. Failure to comply within 48 hours of receipt of this notice will result in a daily non-compliance fee of $500 to be billed retroactively to the date of notice. Keys will be stored in a secure lockbox in the HOA President's home office for rapid deployment. Thank you for your cooperation in keeping Oak Haven safe. It was signed with a flourish of aggressive, looping ink. Patricia Halloway, HOA President. I set the letter down. I looked at my coffee. I looked at the window. Then I looked back at the letter. Rapid deployment, I whispered to the empty kitchen. She's going to rapidly deploy herself into my living room. I knew exactly what this was. This wasn't about gas leaks. My house was fully electric. I didn't even have a gas line. This wasn't about water mains. The main shutoff was at the street, accessible to anyone with a wrench. This was about control. Patricia Halloway was a woman who had retired from some mid-level bureaucratic nightmare job, probably something at the DMV or the IRS, where her soul had calcified into a rigid geometric shape. She had brought that energy to the suburbs with the force of a hurricane. She was the kind of person who measured grass with a ruler. I'm not speaking metaphorically. I had literally seen her on her hands and knees in my neighbor's yard with a school ruler, checking if the fescue was exceeding the mandated 2.5 inches. She had fined me last month because my trash can was visible from the street at 6 p.m. on pickup day. The pickup window ended at 5 p.m. I had been at work. She fined me $50. 2 weeks before that, she tried to have my brother's truck towed from my driveway because it had a bumper sticker for a local heavy metal band. She claimed it violated the community's morality clause, and now she wanted a key, a physical key, to my house, to the place where I slept, where I showered, where I kept my server racks and my proprietary code. She wanted the ability to waltz in whenever she suspected an emergency. Knowing Patricia, an emergency would be defined as, I suspect Jack has painted his hallway a non-approved shade of taupe. I stood up. The chair scraped loudly against the floor. I couldn't let this slide. If I gave her a key, I might as well hand over my dignity and my soul in a Ziploc bag. I needed to talk to her. I needed to look her in the eye and see if she was actually serious. I put on my shoes, my confrontation sneakers, as I liked to call them, and marched out the door. Patricia lived 3 houses down. Her house was easy to spot. It was the one that looked like it had been generated by an AI instructed to create the perfect suburban prison. The hedges were cut into perfect cubes. The flowers were arranged by color spectrum. There was a decorative flag by the mailbox that said "Live, Laugh, Love," but the font made it look like a threat. I walked up her driveway. Her garage door was open, revealing a pristine floor that looked like you could perform open-heart surgery on it. And there she was, Patricia Halloway. She was wearing a floral blazer, khaki capris, and a visor. She was holding a clipboard in one hand and a digital camera in the other. She was currently zooming in on a microscopic crack in her own driveway, likely documenting it so she could yell at the concrete pouring company later. "Patricia?" I called out. She turned. Her smile was immediate, tight, and didn't reach her eyes. Her eyes were cold, calculating sharks swimming in a sea of eyeshadow. "Jack," she said. Her voice had that sugary, high-pitched lilt that Southern women use when they are about to insult your entire lineage. "To what do I owe the pleasure? Did you finally decide to power wash your walkway? It's looking a bit dingy." I stopped at the edge of her garage, respecting the invisible force field of her property line. I held up the letter. "I got your certified mail, Patricia." "Oh, good." She clapped her hands together, the clipboard clattering against her rings. "The new safety initiative, isn't it exciting? We're finally bringing Oak Haven up to code with the luxury communities in the next county." "Exciting isn't the word I'd use," I said, keeping my voice level. "Patricia, I'm not giving you a key to my house." Her smile didn't waver, but the temperature in the driveway dropped 10 degrees. "I beg your pardon?" I said, "No, you're not having a key. It's a security risk. I have expensive equipment in my home. I work in cybersecurity. Handing out physical keys to third parties violates my employment contracts and my personal standards." Patricia let out a short, dismissive laugh. "Jack, don't be dramatic. It's not a third party. It's the board. We are your neighbors. We are elected officials." "You were elected by 12 people, Patricia, 6 of whom were terrified you'd find them if they didn't vote for you." "That is hearsay," she snapped. She took a step forward. "Listen to me, Jack. This isn't a request. It's a bylaw. Bylaw 14. B was ratified at the last meeting." "The meeting on the Tuesday before Thanksgiving?" I asked. "The one where nobody showed up because everyone was traveling?" "Quorum was established via proxy votes," she said smoothly. She had an answer for everything. "The bylaw is valid. We need access for emergencies. What if you're on vacation and a pipe bursts? Do you want your house to flood? We would be doing you a favor." "If a pipe bursts, I have smart water sensors that shut off the main valve automatically," I countered. I get an alert on my phone. I don't need you entering my house." "Technology fails, Jack," she said, shaking her head as if I were a naive child. "Batteries die. Wi-Fi goes down. A metal key is reliable. A metal key is safe." "Safe for who?" I asked. "Where are these keys going to be stored?" "In a secure lockbox in my home office." "And who has access to your home office?" "Myself, the treasurer, and the secretary." "So, Bob and Susan," I said. "Bob, who lost his own car in the mall parking lot last week, and Susan, who leaves her garage door open all night? Those are the people guarding access to my home?" Patricia bristled. Her face flushed a mottled pink. "How dare you question the integrity of the board? We are volunteers, Jack. We sacrifice our time to keep your property values high." "My property values are fine, Patricia. My privacy is what's tanking." She straightened her spine, puffing out her chest like a bantam rooster. "Look, you have 48 hours. If I don't have a key in my hand by Thursday morning, the fines begin, $500 a day. And don't think you can ignore them. We will put a lien on your house. We will garnish your wages. We will foreclose on you, Jack. I have done it before, and I will do it again." She wasn't lying. 2 years ago, the Johnsons on the corner lost their house because they refused to remove a treehouse. Patricia had bled them dry with legal fees until they capitulated. "So that's it?" I asked. "Comply or be destroyed." "It's not destruction, Jack," she said, her smile returning, sharper this time. "It's compliance. We just want a safe, uniform community. Why do you have to be so difficult? What are you hiding in there?" "That's none of your business," I said. "It becomes my business when you live in my community," she said. I looked at her. I realized then that arguing with logic was useless. You cannot use logic to dismantle an edifice built on power and boredom. Patricia didn't care about safety. She cared about the key. She wanted the heavy, tangible weight of ownership in her pocket. She wanted to know that she could get in, even if she never did. It was the ultimate power trip. "Fine," I said. "I'll read the bylaws. I'll see what I can do." "Thursday morning, Jack," she called after me as I turned to walk away. "Don't be late. I start the paperwork at 9:01 a.m. I walked back to my house, the anger now replaced by a cold, hard focus. I wasn't going to give her a key. That was non-negotiable. But I couldn't afford a $500 daily fine, and I didn't have the time or energy for a 2-year lawsuit. I needed a third option. I needed a way to comply that was so technically accurate, so aggressively obedient, that it would make her wish she had never learned to read. I went into my office, a room filled with 3 monitors, a server rack that hummed like a beehive, and a desk cluttered with empty energy drink cans. I pulled out the Oak Haven Estates governing documents binder. It was 4 inches thick. Most people threw this in a drawer and forgot about it. I had kept mine, knowing that one day it would be a weapon. I flipped to the back, to the addendums. There it was. The freshly printed page regarding Bylaw 14. B. I read it. I read it again. I parsed the syntax like I was debugging code. Homeowners must provide the HOA board with a method of entry compatible with the installed locking mechanism of the primary residence. I stopped. My finger hovered over the sentence. Compatible with the installed locking mechanism, and it didn't say copy of the key. The letter she sent said that, but the bylaw, the legally binding document, used broader language. It used language designed to be inclusive, probably copied and pasted from some generic legal template they found online. If the installed locking mechanism was a standard quick-set deadbolt, then yes, the compatible method of entry was a brass key. But what if the locking mechanism changed? If I installed a keypad, the compatible method would be a code, but Patricia would just demand the code, and then she'd have access. That wasn't good enough. If I installed a card reader, she'd demand a card. Again, physical access. I needed a locking mechanism where the compatible method of entry was something she couldn't simply take, something she couldn't put on a keychain, something that required presence. I spun my chair around to my computer and woke the screens. I opened a browser and bypassed consumer sites like Amazon or Home Depot. I went straight to the industrial security suppliers, the kind of vendors who sell to embassies, data centers, and paranoid billionaires. I searched for high-security biometric access control, residential retrofit, liveness detection, anti-duplication. The results flooded in. Fingerprint scanners, iris recognizers, facial geometry maps. Then I found it. The Biofortress 9000. It was beautiful. It was terrifying. It was a beast of a lock. The product description read like poetry to my nerdy soul. The Biofortress 9000 is a Class 4 restricted access unit. It utilizes multimodal authentication requiring a thumbprint, a voice passphrase, and a retinal scan. Features include 256-bit encryption, localized data storage, no cloud vulnerability, EMP shielding, and a reinforced titanium alloy bolt throw. Note: no physical key override is available on this model to prevent pick attacks. No physical key override. That was the golden ticket. If I installed this, there would be no key to give. The only compatible method of entry would be the biological data of the user. If Patricia wanted access, she couldn't just take a key and wait for me to leave. She would have to be registered. She would have to stand on my porch, let me scan her thumb, map her eye, and record her voice. And even then, she wouldn't have a key. She would be the key. But wait, if I registered her, she could still get in. That defeated the purpose, didn't it? I leaned back, steepled my fingers, and thought. The bylaw said I had to provide a method of entry. It didn't say she had to accept it. If I offered to register her, I was complying. I was providing the method. If she refused to provide her biometric data because she was a paranoid technophobe who thought 5G towers caused bunions, then she was the one failing to accept the compliant method. It was a stalemate. A beautiful, malicious stalemate. But I could take it a step further. I could make it uncomfortable. I could make it visceral. Patricia wanted a physical object. She was obsessed with the tangible. If she demanded a physical key for a biometric lock, what would that be? For a fingerprint scanner, the physical key is a finger. I started to laugh. It was a low, dark sound that bounced off the walls of my office. "Okay, Patricia," I said to the monitor. "You want a key? I'll give you a key. But you're going to have to bring a cooler." I looked at the price tag on the Biofortress 9000. $4,200 plus expedited shipping. It was an insane amount of money to spend to prove a point. It was fiscal irresponsibility of the highest order. I clicked Add to Cart. I clicked Checkout. I paid for overnight shipping. Then I picked up my phone. I needed a contractor. I couldn't install this thing myself. It required structural reinforcement of the door frame. If I put this lock on a standard wooden jamb, the lock would be stronger than the wall. Someone could just kick the wall down and the lock would remain floating in space. I scrolled through my contacts until I found Locksmith Larry. Larry wasn't just a locksmith. Larry was an artist of security. He was the guy who installed the panic room for the CEO of the bank downtown. He was a guy who thought the concept of too much security was a logical fallacy. I hit dial. "Yeah?" Larry answered on the second ring. He sounded like he was currently eating a sandwich while welding. "Larry, it's Jack. I have a job for you." "I'm booked out 3 weeks, Jack." "It's an emergency. It involves the HOA." There was a pause. The chewing stopped. "The HOA? That lady with the visor?" "The very same." "I hate that lady," Larry said with feeling. "She told me my van was aesthetically displeasing last time I was parked in your driveway. I'm installing a Biofortress 9000 on my front door. tomorrow." I heard a heavy clank on the other end, as if Larry had dropped a tool. "A biofortress? On a residential door? Jack, are you keeping plutonium in there?" "I'm keeping Patricia out." "I'll be there at 8 a.m., Larry said. "I'll bring the heavy drills." I hung up. The adrenaline was pumping through me now. I wasn't the victim anymore. I was the architect of a very expensive, very petty trap. I spent the rest of the day prepping. I took photos of my current door. I printed out the bylaws. I highlighted the relevant sentences in neon yellow. I drafted an email to the board, but I didn't send it yet. I wanted the element of surprise. That night, I dreamed of retina scanners and severed thumbs. It was the best sleep I'd had in months. The next morning arrived with the subtlety of a freight train. At exactly 7:55 a.m., the sound of a diesel engine idling rattled my front window. I looked out through the blinds to see Larry's van backing into my driveway. It was a white Ford E-Series that had seen better decades, with Larry's lock and "safe we get in when you can't" stenciled on the side. In a font that suggested he had painted it himself during a sneezing fit, I opened the front door. The old, weak wooden door with its pathetic brass deadbolt, and stepped out with 2 mugs of black coffee. Larry climbed out of the van. He was wearing coveralls that were more grease than fabric and a tool belt that looked heavy enough to anchor a small boat. He squinted at the morning sun, then at my house, then at me. "You got the coffee," Larry grunted, accepting the mug. "Good man. You got the package?" "Tracking says out for delivery. Should be here by 9, I said. Larry took a sip that would have scalded the throat of a lesser mortal and nodded at my front door. "So, this is the victim?" "That's the victim." He walked up to the porch and kicked the door frame with the toe of his steel-toed boot. It made a hollow thud. "Pine," he said with disdain. "Standard builder-grade garbage. A motivated Girl Scout could kick this in if she wanted to sell cookies bad enough." "That's why we're upgrading," I said. "Upgrading is putting in a Strike Master plate," Larry said, pulling a tape measure from his belt. "What you're doing isn't an upgrade, Jack, it's a fortification. You realize the biofortress requires a steel core frame, right? I have to rip all this wood out. I have to bolt steel channels into your king studs. This is going to sound like a dentist drilling into a skeleton for about 4 hours." "Music to my ears," I said. "Patricia Halloway lives 3 doors down. I hope she hears every screw turning." Larry grinned, revealing a gold tooth that I suspected he installed himself. "All right, let's make some noise." The delivery truck arrived 40 minutes later. The driver, a young guy with calves the size of cantaloupes, actually groaned as he hauled the box up the driveway. The box was black, sleek, and stamped with warnings. Heavy, team lift, sensitive electronics. "Sign here," the driver wheezed. "What is this, lead bricks?" "Freedom," I said, signing the pad. Larry and I carried the box into the foyer. We cut the straps. When we lifted the lid, it was like opening a weapons crate in a video game. Nestled in high-density foam was the unit. The faceplate was brushed black steel, cold to the touch. The scanner glass was dark and ominous. The bolt mechanism, the part that actually locked the door, was a solid block of titanium alloy with 3 one-inch throw pins. "My God," Larry whispered, wiping his hands on his coveralls before touching it. "It's beautiful. I haven't seen a Model 9000 in the wild. Usually these go to server farms in Ashburn." "Can we make it fit?" I asked. Larry looked at the lock, then at my door, then back at the lock. He cracked his knuckles. "Jack, with enough torque and enough anger, I can make anything fit." The next 6 hours were a symphony of destruction. Larry didn't just remove the old door, he exorcised it. He used a reciprocating saw to slice through the old nails, the wood screaming as it gave way. We stripped the entryway down to the rough opening, exposing the house's framing. At around 11 a.m., Patricia Holloway did a drive-by. I saw her white SUV slow down to a crawl. She rolled the window down about 2 inches, just enough to peer out, but not enough to let in unfiltered air. She stared at the gaping hole in the front of my house. She stared at the sparks flying from Larry's angle grinder as he cut a steel header. I waved. She didn't wave back. She just tapped something into her phone, probably a note about unsightly construction debris, and drove off. "She's watching!" I yelled over the grinder. "Let her watch!" Larry yelled back, sparks cascading over his safety goggles. "She's witnessing the birth of the Citadel." By 2 p.m., the frame was done. We had bolted C-channel steel into the studs. The new door itself was a solid core slab clad in a metal veneer that matched the frame. It was heavy. When you swung it, it didn't drift. It moved with intention. Then came the wiring. The Biofortress needed dedicated power. I crawled through the attic, dragging a generic Romex cable through mounds of fiberglass insulation, sweating profusely, while Larry shouted directions from below. "Feed me the copper, Jack! Feed the beast!" I dropped the line down the wall cavity. Larry caught it, stripped it, and wired it into the transformer block. Finally, at 4:30 p.m., it was time to mount the faceplate. It clicked into place with a satisfying mechanical precision. Larry tightened the tamper-proof Torx screws. We stepped back. It looked intense. Against the beige vinyl siding of my suburban home, the black steel door with the glowing blue scanner looked like a glitch in the simulation. It looked like the entrance to a CIA safe house that had been accidentally dropped into desperate housewives. "Power it up," Larry said. I went to the breaker box and flipped the switch. There was a hum, a low, rising tone that sounded like a jet engine spinning up, emanating from the door itself. Then, the screen flickered to life. The blue light intensified, casting a sterile glow on the porch. A synthesized voice, deep and authoritative, boomed from the speaker. "System online, factory reset detected. Please present Administrator Biometrics." Larry clapped his hands. "Oh, I love the voice. It sounds like it wants to hurt people." "That's a good feature." "Okay," I said. "Let's program it." I stepped up to the scanner. "Place thumb on pad," the voice commanded. I pressed my right thumb against the glass. A green light swept under my skin. "Print acquired. Processing. Accepted." "Look into the aperture." I leaned in. A red laser grid mapped my retina. It felt invasive and wonderful. "Retina verified." "State your passphrase." I cleared my throat. I looked at Larry. He grinned. "Patricia has no power here," I said clearly. The machine paused, processing the waveform. Voice print confirmed. Administrator Jack registered. System arming. Thunk, clack, boom. The 3 titanium bolts shot out of the door edge and locked into the steel frame with a sound that vibrated through the floorboards. It was the sound of absolute, non-negotiable closure. Larry walked over and kicked the door. Hard. It didn't budge. It didn't even rattle. It felt like kicking a wall. "That's it," Larry said, packing up his drill. "That door is now the strongest part of your house. If a tornado hits, the house will blow away, and this door will just be standing there in the field, locked." He wrote up the invoice on a clipboard. The total came to $5,200, including the expedited labor. I handed him my credit card without blinking. "Larry," I said, "you're an artist." "I try," he said. He looked at the lock one last time. "So the plan is to make her ask for a key?" "The plan," I corrected, "is to make her realize that in the digital age, the only key is herself. And she hates herself." Larry laughed, a gravelly sound. "You're a sick man, Jack. I like it. Call me if you need a turret installed on the roof. I know a guy in surplus. He climbed into his van and rumbled away, leaving me alone with my new toy. I spent the next hour familiarizing myself with the settings. I set the rejection volume to maximum. I adjusted the sensitivity. Then, I went inside, locked the door, and sat at my computer. It was time. The 48-hour deadline expired tomorrow at 9 a.m. If I didn't provide a key by then, the $500 daily fines would begin. I opened my email client. I found the thread with the board. I started typing, my fingers flying across the mechanical keyboard. I needed the tone to be perfect. It had to be polite, bureaucratic, and utterly infuriating. To Patricia Halloway, President, Bob Miller, Treasurer, Susan Vance, Secretary. Subject, Compliance Notice regarding Bylaw 14. B. Method of entry. Dear Patricia and board members, I am writing to formally confirm my compliance with the recently enforced Community Safety and Emergency Preparedness Initiative. As requested, I have taken steps to ensure the HOA has access to my home in the event of an emergency. However, per the specific wording of Bylaw 14.b, which requires homeowners to provide a method of entry compatible with the installed locking mechanism, I must inform you that a standard metal key is no longer compatible with my residence. In the interest of enhanced security, a goal I know we share, I have upgraded my primary locking mechanism to a BioFortress 9000 biometric access control system. This system utilizes military-grade liveness detection and does not support mechanical key overrides, as keys can be lost, stolen, or duplicated without authorization. Therefore, to provide you with the required method of entry, I must register your biological data directly into the system's local database. Please meet me at my front porch tomorrow, Thursday, at 9 a.m. sharp. I will require your presence to scan your fingerprints, retinas, and voice prints. Please note, as this system relies on biometric authentication, physical proxies, keys, cards, fobs, do not exist. Access requires the physical presence of the authorized user's biological markers. I look forward to enhancing our community's safety together. Sincerely, Jack Thompson, 42 Maple Drive. I read it over. It was a masterpiece of malicious compliance. I wasn't refusing. I was enthusiastically complying in a way that required them to do the one thing they hated most, give up their own privacy. I hit send. Then, I ordered a pizza. When the delivery guy arrived 30 minutes later, I watched him on the camera. He walked up to the door, looked for a doorbell, didn't find one, I had disconnected it, and knocked on the steel. "System armed," the voice shouted at him. "Present credentials." The guy jumped back 3 feet, nearly dropping the pepperoni pie. I opened the door manually from the inside. "Sorry," I said, handing him a $20 tip. "New security system, it's a little sensitive." "Dude," the driver said, eyes wide. Is that HAL 9000? "Cousin," I said, "keep the change." I ate the pizza in the glow of my monitors, watching the inbox. No reply from Patricia. That was expected. She wouldn't reply. She would just show up, expecting to bully me into submission. She probably thought I was bluffing. She probably thought biometric system meant a $50 keypad I bought at Lowe's. She had no idea she was walking into a buzzsaw. I went to bed early, but I slept lightly. The house felt different. It felt tighter, harder. I lay there listening to the hum of the refrigerator and the wind outside, knowing that for the first time since I moved in, nobody could get in unless I wanted them to. There is a specific kind of peace that comes from absolute control. It's addictive. The sun rose on Thursday morning with a mocking brightness. It was a perfect suburban day. Birds were chirping, sprinklers were hissing rhythmically, and somewhere in the distance, a lawnmower droned. I showered, shaved, and put on my serious homeowner clothes, a polo shirt and jeans. I didn't want to look like a slob. I wanted to look like a responsible citizen who was simply following the rules. At 8:30 a.m., I brewed a fresh pot of coffee. At 8:45 a.m., I checked the system diagnostics. Everything was green. The battery backup was at 100%. The sensors were calibrated. At 8:55 a.m., I saw them. I have security cameras, obviously. I pulled up the feed on my phone. They were walking down the sidewalk in a phalanx. Patricia was in the lead, wearing a beige pantsuit that looked like it was made of recycled sandpaper. She had her clipboard, the scepter of her power, clutched against her chest. Flanking her were Bob and Susan. Bob Miller was a nice enough guy, but he had the backbone of a chocolate eclair. He was the treasurer because he was an accountant, but Patricia terrified him. He looked like he would rather be undergoing a root canal than walking up my driveway. Susan Vance, the secretary, was Patricia's mini-me. She was younger, maybe 40, but she had already adopted the haircut. The inverted bob that signaled, "I would like to speak to your manager." She was carrying a label maker. A label maker? They had brought a label maker to tag my key. The arrogance was breathtaking. They turned up my driveway. I watched them on the screen. Patricia stopped at the bottom of the porch steps. She looked at the door. I saw her pause. The sheer visual impact of the Biofortress usually gave people pause. It didn't look like a door. It looked like an airlock. She whispered something to Bob. Bob shrugged. Susan uncapped a pen. I put my phone in my pocket, took a deep breath, and opened the door. Thunk-clack. The sound of the heavy bolts retracting echoed in the morning air. I pushed the heavy steel door open and stepped out onto the porch. "Good morning, board members," I said, my voice projecting clearly. "Right on time." Patricia didn't return the greeting. She marched up the steps, her heels clicking on the concrete. She stopped 3 feet away from me, maintaining the aggressive personal space invasion she was famous for. "Jack," she said, her tone clipped, "we received your email. We are not here to play science fiction games. We are here for the key." She held out her hand, palm up, expectant, demanding. "I see," I said, looking at her hand, then at her face. "Did you read the email, Patricia? Or did you just scan the subject line?" "I read it," she snapped, "and I dismissed it as nonsense. There is no such thing as a lock that doesn't have a key. Even banks have keys. Now hand it over. I have a 9:30 a.m. inspection at the Peterson residence to measure their hydrangeas, and I don't want to be late." "Patricia," I said, stepping aside and gesturing to the black panel. "I am telling you the truth. This is the Biofortress 9000. It is a Class 4 biometric security node. It does not have a keyway. There is no hole to put a piece of metal into. Look." She leaned in, squinting at the smooth black steel. She frowned. She reached out and touched it. "Stand clear!" the voice boomed. Patricia yelped and jumped back, nearly knocking Bob over. "What was that? Who said that?" "The door," I said. "It's warning you that you aren't authorized. It detects unauthorized proximity." "Turn it off," she demanded, smoothing her blazer. "It's loud and aggressive." "It's a security system, Patricia. It's supposed to be aggressive. Now, as I stated, I am fully prepared to comply with Bylaw 14 by. You asked for a method of entry compatible with the mechanism. The mechanism is right here. The compatible method is your biological data." I pointed to the glass scanner pad. "So," I continued, adopting a helpful customer service voice, "who wants to go first? I need a left thumb, a right retina, and a voice sample. Bob, you look ready." Bob looked like he wanted to dissolve into the pavement. I don't know, Jack. Does it hurt?" "The retina scan uses a low-intensity laser," I said. "Totally painless. Unless you blink, then it has to start over." "This is ridiculous," Patricia interrupted. She was regaining her composure, her face settling back into its mask of bureaucratic indignation. I am not giving you my fingerprints, Jack. That is private information. The bylaw doesn't mention privacy exceptions, I countered. It says homeowners must provide. I am providing. If you refuse to accept the provision, that's a failure on the board's part, not mine. We need a key, she shouted. A physical key. Something we can put in the lockbox. But there is no key, I said, acting confused. Patricia, I don't know how to explain this more simply. The technology has surpassed your paperwork. Giving you a piece of metal would be like giving you a spare tire for a horse. Don't you patronize me, she hissed. She looked at the label maker in Susan's hand. We have a system. We label the keys, we organize them. How are we supposed to label a fingerprint? You can label me, I suggested. Just put a sticker on my forehead. Susan snorted, then quickly covered her mouth when Patricia glared at her. I am going to fine you, Patricia said, her voice dropping to a dangerous low. I am going to write you up for non-compliance. $500, starting today and tomorrow, and the next day, until you remove this monstrosity and install a standard deadbolt that fits our system. You can't mandate the hardware, I said, my voice hardening. I checked the architectural guidelines. There is no restriction on door hardware style, only finish. This is matte black, which is an approved finish, and the safety bylaw only requires a compatible method of entry. It does not mandate that I downgrade my security to suit your lack of imagination. My imagination is fine, she yelled. My patience is what is lacking. Give me a way to open this door, Jack, or so help me God, I will call the police and have them break it down. You want to call the police? I asked. For a civil dispute? Be my guest. But I should warn you, Officer Miller was very impressed with the specs when I mentioned it to him. I don't care about Officer Miller. I care about the rules. She was shaking now, the clipboard vibrating against her chest. Give me something. Give me a passcode, a card, anything physical. Patricia, I said, leaning against the doorframe, crossing my arms. You're obsessed with the physical. You want to hold the access in your hand. I get it. It's a control thing. It is a safety thing. Right, safety. I looked at the scanner. Okay, look. I tried to do this the easy way. I tried to register you. You refused. But if you are absolutely adamant that you need a physical object to carry around, a physical object that will act as a key for this specific scanner. I let the sentence hang in the air. Patricia's eyes lit up. She thought she had won. She thought I was about to pull a secret emergency key out of my pocket. Yes, she said breathlessly. Yes? Give it to me. Well, I said, scratching my chin thoughtfully. The scanner requires a fingerprint. It relies on the ridges and valleys of the skin. It also has a temperature sensor, but I can override that in the developer settings. I don't care about the settings. Just give me the key. Patricia, I said softly, the only physical object that opens this door is a finger. She froze. What? A finger, I repeated. If you want a physical key to store in your lockbox, you would need to store a severed human finger. That is the only object that works. The color drained from her face. Bob made a choking sound. I mean, I continued, rambling casually, I guess it doesn't have to be your finger. I could maybe go to the morgue or get a prosthetic. But high-end prosthetics are expensive. So, really, if you want to enter my house when I'm not here, and you refuse to use your own hand attached to your own body, you're going to have to bring a finger in a baggie. Patricia stared at me. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. Maybe you could keep it in the office fridge, I suggested, next to the creamer, to keep it fresh? You, she whispered. Is that what you want, Patricia? I asked, looking her dead in the eye. You want me to provide you with a severed digit to satisfy your paperwork?" "He's crazy," Susan whispered, stepping back. "Patricia, let's go. He's crazy." "I'm not crazy," I said. "I'm compliant. I'm trying to solve your problem. You want a physical key for a biological lock. That's the biology. I'm just the messenger." Patricia's shock turned into a scream. It was a high, piercing sound that shattered the suburban peace. "Threat!" she shrieked. "He is threatening me. He said he's going to cut off a finger." "I did not," I said. "I said you'd need to bring one." "Police!" she yelled, fumbling for her phone, dropping the clipboard. "I am calling 911. You are a psycho. You are a danger to this community." She dialed with trembling fingers, backing away down the driveway as if the door was about to sprout legs and eat her. "Yes, 911. I am at 42 Maple Drive. The homeowner is threatening bodily mutilation. He has a weaponized door. Send help. Send the SWAT team." I watched her, feeling a strange sense of calm. The trap had sprung. She had taken the bait. She was calling the police on a guy standing on his own porch, offering to scan her thumb. I looked at Bob. He was pale. "Bob," I said, "you look like you need a water. Want to come in? I can scan you in right now. Takes 2 seconds." Bob shook his head rapidly. I'm good, Jack. I'm just gonna wait over there." He retreated to the sidewalk. I waited. I heard the sirens in the distance. They were coming closer. Perfect, I thought. Let's get this on public record. The wail of sirens in a quiet suburb is a sound that triggers a primal instinct in everyone. It's the sound of drama. It's the sound of who messed up. And on this particular Thursday morning, the answer to that question, at least in the eyes of my neighbors, was me. 2 cruisers turned onto Maple Drive. They didn't come in with a drift or a screech of tires like in the movies. They rolled in with a heavy, bureaucratic inevitability. The lead car was an SUV, the kind that looks like a tank with a light bar. The second was a standard sedan. Patricia was standing at the end of my driveway, pointing at my house like she was spotting a sniper. "He's there!" she screamed as the first officer opened his door. "The man with the finger! He's on the porch!" I stayed where I was. I knew the drill. Hands visible, no sudden movements, and for the love of God, do not look like a man who collects severed digits. I leaned casually against the frame of the Biofortress 9000, crossing my arms in a way that I hoped said, I am a tax-paying citizen with a high credit score, rather than, I am a supervillain. Officer Miller stepped out of the SUV. I recognized him immediately. He was a veteran of the force, a guy with a mustache that had seen 3 administrations and a hairline that was slowly retreating in surrender. He adjusted his belt, hitched up his pants, and sighed. A sigh that was audible from 30 feet away. All right, Miller said, his voice weary. He walked up the driveway, ignoring Patricia's frantic waving for a moment. He looked at me, then at the black steel door, then back at me. "Morning, Jack," Miller said. "Morning, Officer Miller," I replied. "Patricia says you're threatening to chop people up," Miller said. He didn't have his hand on his gun, which was a good sign. He had his hand on his radio, which meant he was more worried about paperwork than a shootout. "I think chop is a strong word," I said. "We were discussing access control protocols." Patricia scrambled up the driveway behind him, flanking him like a yapping terrier. "He said it!" she yelled, pointing a shaking finger at my face. "He said if I wanted to come in, I had to bring a finger, a severed finger, in a bag. He told me to put it in the office fridge next to the creamer." Miller paused. He looked at me. His mustache twitched. "Did you tell her to put a finger in the fridge, Jack?" "Context is key here, Miller," I said calmly. "Explain the context," Miller said, taking out a small notepad. "And keep it simple. I haven't had lunch." "Okay," I said. The HOA passed a bylaw requiring a key to my house. I complied by installing a new lock. I tapped the Biofortress. This is a biometric lock. It uses fingerprints. I offered to scan Patricia's finger so she could enter. She refused. I am not giving him my biometrics, Patricia interjected. He'll sell them to the Chinese. Right, I continued. So since she refused to use her attached finger, she demanded a physical object to open the door. I explained to her that for a fingerprint scanner, the only physical object that works as a key is, well, a finger. I told her that if she insists on carrying a physical key, she'd have to carry a finger. It was a logical deduction, not a threat. Miller stared at me. He stared at Patricia. He looked at the lock. So, Miller said slowly, you didn't threaten to cut her finger off? No, I said. I value her fingers. They're excellent for pointing at things. Miller bit the inside of his cheek. I could see the struggle. He was trying to maintain professional composure, but the absurdity was leaking through. Ma'am, Miller turned to Patricia. Did he brandish a knife? Did he make a move toward you? No, Patricia admitted, her face flushing. But the implication? The psychological violence. He has turned his house into a fortress. Look at that thing. It's not residential. It's aggressive. Miller walked up to the door. He stood inches from the scanner. Unauthorized proximity detected, the voice boomed. Step back or alarm will trigger. Miller jumped a little. Jesus, it talks? It has voice response, yes, I said. It also has a camera recording this entire interaction. Would you like a copy for your report? Miller looked at the camera lens. You got audio too? Clear as a bell. Miller turned back to Patricia. Ma'am, this is a civil dispute. You want a key. He says the key is a finger. You don't want to give him a finger. That's not a police matter. That's a lawyer matter. He is harassing the board, Patricia shrieked. He is making a mockery of the bylaws. Being a smartass isn't a crime, ma'am, Miller said. Otherwise, half the teenagers in this town would be in juvie. Unless he actually pulls a knife or threatens to hurt you, there's nothing I can do. So you're going to leave? Patricia gaped. You're leaving me here with him? I suggest you leave his property, ma'am, Miller said. Technically, since he's asked you to leave and you're still screaming, you are the one bordering on trespassing. Patricia gasped. It was a sound like a vacuum cleaner clogging. She looked at Miller, then at me, then at the neighbors who had gathered on their lawns to watch the show. This isn't over, she hissed at me. You think you're so smart. Wait until the fines start. Wait until the liens start. I will take this house, Jack. I will take it apart brick by brick. Make sure you get a permit for that demolition, I called out cheerfully. She spun around and marched down the driveway, Bob and Susan trailing in her wake like exhaust fumes. Miller watched them go. He let out a long breath and turned back to me. Biofortress 9000? He asked, nodding at the door. Yeah? Is it really EMP-proof? Shielded up to 50 kilovolts. Nice, Miller said. My brother-in-law has the 5000 model on his gun safe. It's finicky with sweaty hands. This one better? Way better. It has a capacitive sensor, works even if your hands are wet or dirty. Miller nodded appreciatively. Don't chop off any fingers, Jack. I'll try my best, officer. He tipped his cap and walked back to his cruiser. As he drove away, I saw him laughing. The victory felt good, but I knew it was the calm before the storm. Patricia wasn't the type to retreat. She was the type to regroup and escalate. She fought wars with paper, and she had an unlimited supply of ammunition. The first fine arrived the next morning. It was taped to the Biofortress scanner faceplate with blue painter's tape. Notice of violation. Violation, failure to provide emergency access key, Bylaw 14, B. Fine amount, $500. 00 asterisk. Status, first notice. I took it down, scanned it into my computer, and filed it in a folder labeled The War. The next day, Saturday, another one appeared. Notice of violation. Violation. Failure to provide emergency access. Key. Violation. Unauthorized exterior modification. Door hardware. Not consistent with community aesthetic. Fine amount, $500 plus $200. Asterisk. Total due, $1,200. Asterisk. Sunday morning, I woke up to find a third note. This one included a new charge. Violation. Improper display of hostile signage, referring to the access denied audio. Fine amount, $100. Asterisk. By Monday morning, I owed the HOA nearly $2,000. I sat in my kitchen, drinking coffee, looking at the stack of notices. Most people would panic. Most people would cave. $2,000 is a mortgage payment. But I wasn't most people. I had a savings account specifically designated for stupid problems, and this was the stupidest problem I had ever encountered. But I couldn't just ignore them. If I ignored them, they would eventually put a lien on the house. A lien meant I couldn't sell, I couldn't refinance, and eventually, they could foreclose. I needed to go nuclear. I needed a lawyer who understood that this wasn't about money. It was about pain. I called Saul. Saul wasn't a Better Call Saul strip mall lawyer, but he had the same spiritual energy. He was a real estate attorney who specialized in HOA disputes. He hated HOAs. He hated them with a passion that burned brighter than the sun. He once told me that HOAs were unconstitutional micro-governments run by people who peaked in hall monitor duty. "Jack?" Saul said when I walked into his office later that afternoon. He was wearing a suit that was slightly too shiny and a tie that was aggressively purple. "You look like a man who has annoyed a middle-aged woman." "I annoyed Patricia," I said, sitting down. Saul groaned and rubbed his temples. "Patricia Halloway, the Genghis Khan of suburbia. What did she do this time? Measure your grass with a laser?" "She demanded a key to my house. I gave her a fingerprint scanner. She called the cops." I laid the folder of fines on his desk. Saul opened it. He read the bylaw. He read my emails. He read the police report I had requested. A slow smile spread across his face. It was the smile of a shark sensing blood in the water. "Jack," Saul said softly, "this is beautiful. This is art." "Is it winnable?" "Winnable?" Saul laughed. "Jack, they walked right into a bear trap. Look at the wording of the bylaw, compatible method of entry. You are technically in compliance. They are refusing the method. That's point 1. Point 2. The demand for a physical key to a private residence when a secure alternative exists falls under unreasonable search and seizure if we argue the HOA is acting as a state actor, which, given their interaction with the police, we can imply. Point 3. They are fining you for unauthorized modification. But did you check the architectural guidelines?" "I did. No restrictions on hardware, only finish." "And is it the right finish?" "Matte black. Approved in the 2021 handbook." Saul slammed his hand on the desk. "We are going to crush them. We aren't just going to get the fines dismissed. We are going to sue them for harassment, emotional distress, and legal fees." "I don't want money," I said. "I want her gone." Saul looked at me over his glasses. "You want a regime change?" "I want a revolution." Saul nodded. He pulled a fresh legal pad toward him. "Okay, here's the plan. We don't sue yet, we send a letter. A letter of demand. We demand they rescind the fines immediately, or we file a suit that will drain their reserve fund dry. Patricia cares about power, But the rest of the board, Bob and Susan, they care about their property values. If they think a lawsuit is going to bankrupt the HOA, they will turn on her. Divide and conquer, I said. Exactly. We make Patricia the liability. Saul spent the next hour drafting the letter. It was vicious. It cited case law I had never heard of. It used words like malfeasance, fiduciary negligence, and punitive damages. My client, Mr. Thompson, has gone to great personal expense to comply with Bylaw 14. B. The board's refusal to accept the provided biometric access and the subsequent campaign of harassment and baseless fines constitutes a breach of the covenant of quiet enjoyment. Quiet enjoyment, I repeated, reading the draft. I like that. It's a real legal term, Saul said. It basically means they have to shut up and let you live. We sent the letter via certified mail, return receipt requested. Now we waited. 3 days later, the atmosphere in Oak Haven Estates shifted. The letter had arrived. I knew because I saw Bob Miller walking his dog past my house. Usually Bob would look away or pretend to be on his phone. This time he stopped. He looked at my door. He looked at me, sitting on the porch. He gave me a tiny, almost imperceptible nod. It was the first crack in the armor. That evening, I got an email. Not from Patricia, but from the Oak Haven board. Dear Mr. Thompson, the board is in receipt of your counsel's correspondence. In light of the points raised, we have decided to hold an emergency special session this Friday at 7 p.m. at the Community Center to discuss the status of Bylaw 14. B and the associated fines. Your attendance is requested. Sincerely, the Oak Haven HOA Board. It was signed by the board, not Patricia. That was significant. Patricia signed everything personally. If she hadn't signed this, it meant she had been outvoted on sending it. The emergency special session. This was it, the showdown. I spent the next 2 days preparing. I didn't just want to win. I wanted to put on a show. I printed out enlargements of the lock's specs. I printed out the police report where Miller called it a civil dispute. I even printed out a picture of a severed finger. Fake, obviously, just to have in my pocket as a prop, though Saul advised against using it. Friday night came. The community center was a bland beige building near the neighborhood pool. Usually these meetings were attended by 4 people. Tonight the parking lot was full. Word had spread. The finger guy was taking on Patricia. The neighborhood was bored, and this was better than Netflix. I walked in at 6:55 p.m. The room was buzzing. There were about 60 folding chairs set up, and every single one was taken. People were standing in the back. At the front of the room sat the board at a long plastic table. Patricia sat in the center. She looked tired. Her hair was slightly less perfect than usual, and her lips were pressed into a line so thin they had vanished. Bob sat to her right, looking at his hands. Susan sat to her left, looking terrified. I walked to the front row. I didn't sit, I stood. All right, Patricia said, banging her gavel. It sounded weak in the packed room. This emergency session is called to order. The topic is the recent disputes regarding the safety initiative. Dispute? Someone shouted from the back. You mean the fact that you tried to arrest Jack for owning a door? Laughter rippled through the room. Patricia slammed the gavel again. Order! We will have order! Mr. Thompson has threatened the board with litigation. We are here to resolve this. She couldn't even bring herself to look at me. I didn't threaten litigation, I said, my voice carrying clearly without a microphone. I promised it. There's a difference. I turned to face the crowd. Neighbors, I said, how many of you have been fined by this board for something stupid? Raise your hands. Hesitation. Then one hand went up, then another, then 30. I got fined for a bird feeder, Mrs. Higgins yelled. I got fined because my mailbox was too dusty, Mr. Henderson shouted. I got fined for parking in my own driveway, a young guy in the back hollered. Exactly, I said. This isn't about safety. Bylaw 14, B isn't about emergencies, it's about access. It's about control. They want keys to your houses. Do you want Patricia Halloway to have a key to your house? No! The room roared in unison. Patricia stood up, her face blotchy. I am trying to keep you safe. What if there is a fire? If there is a fire, the fire department has axes, I shouted back. They don't need a key, they kick the door down. That's how it works. I turned back to the board. Bob, Susan, you guys are on the deed to your houses, right? Do you want to give Patricia a key to your house? Bob looked up. He looked at Patricia, who was glaring at him with pure venom. Actually, Bob said, his voice shaking slightly. No, I don't. The room gasped. Mutiny. Bob, Patricia shrieked, you are out of order. I'm the treasurer, Bob said, standing up. He found his spine somewhere between the floor and his full height. And as treasurer, I've been looking at the legal fees we're about to incur fighting Jack. His lawyer is talking about a 6-figure lawsuit. Our reserve fund is only $50,000. If we lose, and we will lose, we will have to do a special assessment. Every homeowner in this room will have to pay $2,000 to cover the legal costs. That was the kill shot. You can annoy people with rules, but if you threaten their wallets, you are dead. $2,000? Someone yelled. Hell no! Impeach her! Another voice screamed. Patricia looked around the room, wild-eyed. She was losing them. She had lost them. I moved to strike Bylaw 14. B from the record immediately, Bob said. Seconded, Susan squeaked. All in favor? Bob asked the room. Every hand went up. Motion carries, Bob said. The bylaw is struck. Jack, your fines are dismissed. And one more thing, I said, cutting through the cheers. I move for a vote of no confidence in the president. Silence fell. This was the coup de grace. Seconded, Mr. Henderson said from the front row. All in favor of removing Patricia Halloway as president? Bob asked. The hands went up again. It was a sea of hands. Patricia didn't wait for the count. She grabbed her purse, grabbed her gavel, clutching it like a holy relic, and stormed out the side door. The door slammed shut behind her, a punctuation mark on her reign of terror. The room erupted. People were clapping. Mrs. Higgins was crying. It was like the end of a war movie, but with more polo shirts. The aftermath was swift. Bob became the interim president. He was terrible at it, which was exactly what we wanted. He forgot to schedule meetings. He lost the fine book. The grass in the neighborhood got a little longer, the trash cans stayed out a little later, and Oak Haven Estates became a place where people actually wanted to live. As for me, I became a minor celebrity. The finger guy. The Bio Fortress 9000 stayed. I wasn't going to take it down. It was a monument to the victory. A few weeks later, I was outside washing my car. The sun was shining, and the air smelled like freedom and soap. A white SUV rolled slowly down the street. It was Patricia. She wasn't president anymore, but she still lived there. She stared at me as she passed. I stopped scrubbing. I stood up, wiped my hands on a towel, and walked to the front door. I held up my hand. I extended my thumb. I pressed it to the scanner. Thunk-clack. The bolts retracted loud enough for her to hear from the street. She sped up and drove away. I walked into my house, the cool air conditioning hitting my face. The voice of the lock greeted me as the door sealed shut behind me. Welcome home, Administrator. Good to be home, I said. I went to the fridge, grabbed a cold beer, and sat on the couch. I looked at the coffee table where the pile of fines used to be. It was empty. The lock hummed softly in the distance, a vigilant, robotic watchdog. They wanted a key, they wanted access, they wanted a piece of me. They learned the hard way. In a world of keys, sometimes you have to be the lock. And if they don't like it, well, they can always bring a finger.